Well, Africa has a bustling youth population, ever growing and ever rising, and with this generation, those before it comes an interesting company, the social media. Now, the significance of social media in Africa and the rest of the world today is unrivaled, and its power indisputable. It's been a great meeting point for some of the greatest political sensitization, fueled some of the world's biggest uprising, being a source of wealth to individuals, regardless of class or color, major countries, and sadly, is breaking some countries. Now, with social media around, we ask the big question, what does social media, do in shaping the future? Is it also capable of ruining its beauty? Today we'll be analyzing the impact of social media on the continent. Welcome to VSA. M. Sulaiman. Across the world, social media is the new norm. It is defining times and generations, opening doors for many and shaping futures. It's the foundation on which the world has become a closer community. Like every invention, there are pros and cons. As the world continues to become a closer community of humans, interacting across various social profiles also become more established. Africans can now reach their loved ones in every part of the world. Communication access is easier, internet penetration is growing in countries, and mobile technology is getting more accepted across borders. Like it benefits the majority, especially in the area of access to information, it is killing others too in the areas of misguided social perceptions. In the absence of regulation, many have run with fake news, sometimes causing deep violence that's hard to control. Suicide rates, rates of depression, and other social misnomers have become critical issues bordering on the use of the social media, as the simplicity behind a click may be just as great as its implication. Well, joining me to look at this today is Yusuf Jimoh. He's a senior software developer, automations and artificial intelligence. Dr. Ifeanyi-Ajufo, she's a senior lecturer of law and technology, Swansea University in the UK, and Kunle Falowo, a media consultant in the United States. Well, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for joining me. Yusuf, well, again, thanks for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us. Yusuf, quickly here, we're trying to look at an assessment of the impact of social media at the moment on the continent.
Well, social media has been a tool for communication, for interconnection of people, and it has played a major role in developing connectivity in terms of business development, in terms of advocacy, and in terms of technological advancement as well, because lots of the advancements we have got to experience in the world today, many of these conversations were sprang up based on discussions and interactions and engagement of intellectuals on social media. So social media generally has actually become a new world of virtual ideas, and it has connected the world more beautifully. Having said that, it has also been a tool that has been used to annihilate the very existence of justice and truth and the true existence of information on the virtual environment over time. And you may want to ask why this is so, because the majority of the psychology of people, the thought behind the thinking of people, are being governed by the internet, and the larger part of the internet is being dominated by social media. So it has been a platform that one can actually use to alter the psychology of people. And this is the reason this discussion is really important, because so many people have begun to use it to thwart the understanding of people for personal interest, for horrendous political purpose, and of course for deliberate misinformation of people. And that is why this information is pretty much important, and this discussion is pretty much important. We talk about it. And looking at the line of technology, some people make use of social media to drive businesses to drive traffic to their businesses, but they don't care if the content they are put forth is of newsworthy, or they don't care if it is the truth, they don't care if it has genuine content. So all they care about is the traffic and the monetary values that they get from such endeavor. So that is why in the world today, the rate at which people get Google AdSense or see Google AdSense is pretty high, because Google AdSense is one of the ways that people can actually get money for themselves through traffic, surge of traffic to the website. So people like to put forth sensational news without having to, cross check, without having to, follow the protocols, the traditional protocols of genuine journalism, because what they care about is how to get, people onto their site. And this is where you talk about clickbait. Clickbait is one of the tools that requires people posting sensational, content online. Then this content can actually attract people to their site. So this is one of the many reasons that we have fake news on the internet today. And more sadly, in our terrain in Africa, we don't have the regulations to actually, question the providers of the social media technologies to be responsible for all of these laxities that the social media.
Yusuf, allow me come in here quickly, Yusuf. Apologies for butting in. We'll come back to those aspects. Trying to look at some other ways where we can actually. We on the continent can stem the tide for some of those anomalies. But quickly here, let me bring in Kunle Falowo. Kunle, good to see you, and thanks for all you do. We've been, I think Africa is proud of you, following what you've been doing. Very quickly here, Kunle, perhaps I should also ask if you've been able to gauge an assessment of the use or otherwise of social media by Africans and the continent.
Thanks for having me, first of all. So let me start with a small introduction of what we have as the social media platform, or as it is, the empire of social media as it is. When we look at Facebook, it has about 2.2 billion people on that platform, just Facebook alone. When you look at Twitter, Twitter has about 330 million subscribers to it. WhatsApp has about 1.5 billion people on there. And then when you look at Instagram, which is quite early, it came in 5 years after Facebook, which was introduced to our lives in sometime around 2004. It came in 5 years after, like I said. It has about followership or people, having the stuff on their phone, about 1.1 billion people are also on there. Now, when you look at all the numbers put together, you'll realize that the 21st century has changed, and internet and social media in particular has become the new crude, and it's the new oil, and it's the thing that is kind of revolving around our world. We are all connected to it, one way or the other. The adults, the youngsters, the baby boomers, everybody, every facet of our life, internet connectivity and social media is all interwoven in there, and it's a big deal, and it's something that we need to talk about, because there's so many things that is wrong about social media, and there's so many great things that's happening in our lives as a result of having social media in it. With that being said, so many things is happening, and when we look at the United States, for instance, there was this whistleblower. I don't know if you're familiar with the story. She worked with Facebook for quite some time, and she was very distressed, and she came to Congress. Actually, she was invited by the United States Congress to talk about some of the things that she felt that it was wrong about social media, particularly Facebook. And she actually opened so many cankerworms in Facebook, and we now discovered with the conversation that it is now becoming a political tool. It is now becoming the survival of the fittest. If you have the funds and the finance to it, you're able to go out there and talk about virtually, literally anything at all. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's false. So long as you have the capital to fund your campaign, you could literally broadcast anything. And this is some of the problems. This is the revelation or the beginning of the problem on our social media life. And we have to look at it collectively as a government, as a people, and as users of social media.
Kunle, I think you have actually also been able to bring the attention of Africa and Africans to the need for a revisit of what social media is about. Let me go to, before I go back to Yusuf, because I'm still not unsure if we have Dr. Nena back. She couldn't hear us. Yeah, okay, looks like Dr. Nena is here, but I'll come back to you and Yusuf quickly, so that we can also, because there are movies and documentaries that have actually been able to put, that people have been able to put together to expose further some of these, key things both of you have raised. Quickly here, Dr. Nena, apologies again. Good to see that you're back. We're excited having you on the show, just like we did the last time. But listening to Kunle and Yusuf, help us here if there are suggestions around, regulation of social media companies on the continent. Do you think, regulation is same as restriction?
Thank you so much, Suleiman. It's a pleasure to join in for this very important conversation. In terms of regulation, the problem you have in Africa is this general notion, this seeming understanding that when you think about social media platforms, it's just a platform where a bunch of youths are all sitting and engaging in lawlessness, anarchy. And I have to point out that there is so much more social media is a basis for. Social media has become a platform for governance. It's a platform for people to demand accountability. It's a platform for even sharing notions of cooperation amongst governments. International organizations like the UN have handles, regional organizations like the African Union, the European Union, the Council of Europe, they all have social media handles. So there is so much more to the internet and to the social media platforms than this simple engagement amongst youths or people, conversations. Social media has become a driver of digital economy, has become a driver for, human rights and all kinds of issues. But then the problem, like Kunle pointed out as well, is also these other dimensions that relate to crimes and relate to criminal liability, issues of defamation, hate speech, child pornography, all kinds of issues, that also touch upon national security and which calls for regulation, misinformation. And this is not just an issue with Africa. However, it is not that in the totality of it, I agree. The internet can exacerbate issues and, violence, security issues if it is not regulated. So regulation is fundamental. But then what you have in terms of regulation in Africa, touching upon what Yusuf and Kunle has said as well, is sort of this misunderstanding as to what security in cyberspace and rule of law entails. I tend to think that governments in Africa overly think that once you talk about cybersecurity, it has to entail militarization, it has to entail national security, and so you begin to see this overt issuance of national security as an alibi to take away the benefits of social media. And at times, I think it hinders the good sides of it, and we have this overwhelming portrayal of social media as being a vice rather than being very beneficial. So in terms of regulation, it's about finding a balance. It has to be done. We have to find a balance. It's quite embarrassing, the number of internet shutdowns you have in Africa. We need to find a balance in terms of regulation. Absolutely know that. I think we'll come back to,
the kind of intrusion which governments on the continent, some governments on the continent have been making, or some have made towards, social media. And then, but quickly, let me bring in Yusuf. Yusuf, I also know that you are also one of those ethical experts in the field. For those that have had time to watch a few of those documentary films put together, for instance, The Social Dilemma, which actually exposed a whole lot about what social media has been able to do to people. That is why we're also talking about suicide and some other key things. But now, for now, let's talk about some of the things Nana has raised. I love to look at the good first before going the other way, and also talking about how governments can actually hands off, some of these things in order for the people not to miss out on the good. Is the continent doing enough, by embracing the good in totality that social media has offered?
Okay, thank you for that beautiful question. And I think I've been waiting for that question patiently. It is important for us to also emphasize and amplify the fact that the government should have its strict, impact on protocols on social media regulation. And I would want to say that African governments alone, the UK government, for example, recently put forth a decisive law concerning social media, and the Prime Minister did emphasize without ambiguity that the House I'm talking about now, and the Prime Minister, there was a law that if there is an horrendous content on the social media and the provider, did not, put an end to it, or did not delete such message, and it leads to chaos or misinformation to annihilate the peacefulness and the tranquility of the community, such provider is liable of losing 10% of the total turnover. This is UK. There are strict laws and strict principles and strict protocols all over the world. And people might have problem with Nigerian government putting forth such law, because you see Nigerians, when they travel to the UK, they can comfortably, abide with such law. They would be quite ecstatic to see the government of UK putting forth a law to regulate the social media. But when it comes to Nigerian government affair, the political affair in Nigeria, they have a second thought. And I have an excuse for them in that perspective, because they don't trust the Nigerian government over time. Because people might believe that if government should put forth a strict policy to regulate social media, it could aggravate the problem, and they may use it for their own political interest. But going by the standardization of the regulation in terms of if we have a sincere government, in terms of when you have a good leadership, it is very, very important that the government has a strict hands on the regulation of social media. And I must also emphasize that each country should have an IT infrastructure to regulate social media. Let me give you a glaring example. You may know that the domain name that is peculiar to Nigeria is .ng. Okay, so if you want to register a domain name that has Nigerian appellation that resides on Nigeria's server is .ng, so you could have .com.ng or .ng as a whole. What would interest you is that if you register a domain name that is .ng, it is more regulated. You can't register names that are quite sensitive, like you can register Mohammed.com.ng or Jesus.com.ng, or those sensitive names that are quite, sensitive to people's perspicacity. You can't do that because Nigeria's .ng registrar, the NIG, and the Nigeria Internet Group and the body in terms of .ng registration, they're very strict on what you put forth on the internet. And when you register a domain, for example, let's say aledesweetguy.com.ng, someone will contact you on an email or communicate you on the phone that what do you intend to do with this domain? This domain sounds pretty much sensitive, but not like a top sensitive domain really, but we still need to clarify from you, what do you want to put in there? They monitor the content of the website. But if you register .com, these servers reside in the US. So, many of the registrars in Nigeria, when you buy a domain name from them, they also buy from the US, for example. The servers and the residents in Nigeria, they don't have Nigerian internet regulation body doesn't have control on .com. So you could register anything on .com, and that's why we have these problems, because anybody could register any domain, put any content in there. But if you register a domain that is .com.ng, it gives you SSL security. When you register it, you don't have phishing on the interface. There's going to be lines of protocols to monitor your content. So I am an advocate of the fact that each government in Africa should have strict policy to also monitor the content on the internet. When Facebook, for example, would have their database outside Nigeria, what for? They should have their infrastructure, present in the country that they are also present, so that the government can work with them to filter fake news, to filter some of these, horrendous content that could, devastate the peacefulness of the community. So in conclusion, I would say that for a sincere government, or a government that the people have trusted over time, they can go ahead to put forth a measure to actually curb social media problems using their own technology to regulate a lot of these things. But Nigerian government will have to do a lot to be able to step on this challenge, because they have trust issues with the people. People do not trust the government over time. So they need to work, they need to do a lot to ensure that the people trust them, so that when they bring forth this policy, people will not kick against the same policy that they would gladly accept in the UK.
Yusuf, we've been able to establish. All right, okay, Yusuf, we've been able to establish the fact that some of the key things that would make a Nigerian or an African kick is the issue of trust. Let me bring in Kunle here. Kunle, well, you've listened to also, and then I also wanted to also weigh in on what she said about, what we should be looking into. But if we say, Kunle, that there are restrictions on free speech, but leave the speeches of some people to fuel violence, do you think that's not doing the world a disservice? Put in perspective some of the key things that has happened in Nigeria, the NSAS, as well as what has happened in the United States leading up to the last election.
Yes, that's a very typical question. It's quite tricky also to answer that, because if you look at the trajectory of the entire world right now, we have news, we have fake news, we have alternative news, and the truth isn't what it is that we think it is anymore. Restrictions and freedom of expressions and freedom of speech is a thin line that will a lot of democratic governments will be very wary to cross when you talk about restricting what's any individual, a right-thinking member of the society who has access to an internet and social media. If you're trying to restrict what they want, what their thoughts are about any topical issue or whatever issue at all, some people will think that the government is not solely given the right to do that, especially when you come to a place like America, for instance, where you have a very politically dividing individual like former President Trump, who has been able to sell a lot of ideas to the people, to a lot of people, and he's been able to successfully further polarize the polity. And the entire world witnessed what happened in the last election. We saw a lot of chaos, and we're still battling with the rioters, which some of them have been convicted of wrongdoing during the riots at the House in Washington. Having said that, when you look at the ways that we could curb the excessive of social media, it's the blame shouldn't, because it's very easy to get carried away and push the bulk of the blame on the government. It's very comfortable and convenient for us to say, hey, let the government tell us what to do and what not to do, or let them set the rules for how we engage with ourselves on social media. I don't think that should stop there. I think the bulk lies on every individual. We all have access to the internet. We have phones in our hands. We have computers and tablets and laptops. And we have access to whatever information that we put out there. Now, we will do ourselves a lot of this, a lot of good if we could kind of regulate the things that because we contribute to the discussion too. Because sometimes when we get a certain information, we're quick to fast forward and send these messages to friends and colleagues and partners and husbands and wives and daughters and brothers and all that, and our associates. Now, if we try and do due diligence by trying to understand and try and do a little bit of fact finding, same in the internet, we'll be able to kind of do a lot of justice and do a lot of rights, and not just push information forward without kind of verifying whatever that we consume. Also, the platform owners will be doing a deep good if they try and authenticate products. For instance, if they say if a company comes to you and tells you, I want you to advertise this product, it lies on you to authenticate this product and see if whatever it is that they say it's going to do, it's actually going to do it. Now, having said that, it goes beyond all of that. Most importantly, we as an individual, because we're more of the consumers of this information and these platforms, and we give them that power to do all that. So we should try as much as possible to sensitize ourselves and our kids to make sure that we don't just send information. We should verify some information before we send it. Now, let's imagine during after the Second World War, when we had Hitler, committing a lot of genocide against the Jews and killing a lot of them. Now, if we had Facebook at that time, now with the current way that social media has been run, Hitler will successfully send his media people to Zuckerberg and pay them, and they'll be able to carry out a hate campaign. And then I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, it will be successful. Now, is it right to discriminate against millions of people because they're not socially desirable, according to what he said? Now, these are the things that we need to morally look at. Is it just about the money? Is it just about the government? When you look at it again, the government alone would not, single-handedly take all the blames. We as an individual, the things that we consume and the things that we put out there also plays a very important role in the entire setting.
Kunle, let's see if Nana can help us here, especially with her legal lenses. Listening to Kunle and Yusuf, something comes to mind. Will they be liable now? Because, for instance, once upon a time, you could send countless messages all at once to a lot of people on WhatsApp. And we woke up someday in an attempt for you to also see that this has been going around the world. WhatsApp put a restriction. You can't just send it to more than 5. And you also see that this message has actually traveled around the world. Doesn't that actually, take the blame off the social media companies? Isn't that enough of an effort from them for them not to be liable, or should we also think that they are liable should anyone approach the law courts?
So there are cases of primary liability and secondary liability. In the first instance, anyone who posts the content will be primarily liable. But in several parts of the world, in places like Europe, where they have the 3-rule strike, a social media platform would be secondarily liable if they have done nothing to prevent such posts. Now, if it is shown that a social media platform has done everything necessary in accordance with law to prevent such posts that have caused an escalation, in that instance, the social media platform will not be liable. If there is a defamatory content, if there is a hate speech, because they are seen as conduit pipes, in that instance, they will be held liable if they would ordinarily know or should have known that such a content exists. So yes, there is some liability, but then it depends on the situation at hand, what is posted, who is posting, and what circumstances, and what the social media platform has done. But an angle I want to bring into this is the point that when we talk about social media platforms and, responsibility, I just want to reemphasize that cyberspace is not tied to any geographically proximate location, and it will be difficult to hold social media platforms accountable per every jurisdiction, saying that they must be domiciled in every jurisdiction. And that is why states are pursuing an agenda on digital cooperation. We need mutual legal agreements. And I want to touch upon what Kunle has said as well, the point that individuals owe a responsibility, but I will take that responsibility back to the state. Legally, the welfare of the state is the first obligation, the welfare of the country is the first obligation of the state. What are we doing in raising awareness? What are we doing about digital literacy in Africa? What are we doing about cyber skills to individuals? Are we raising awareness? What are we doing in terms of educational curriculum? We cannot expect that Africa will leapfrog into stages of development like Europe. And so we use Europe as an example, but we also do not think about the inadequacies in Africa. Africa is the least digitalized region of the world. It lacks adequate infrastructure required to effectively tackle cybersecurity and other issues. And so when we have these conversations, we forget that these inadequacies will make all these efforts futile in the African context. If you look at the International Telecommunications Cybersecurity Index, it still reports that Africa exhibits very weak cyber maturity levels. So I'm not saying that the state alone is always responsible, but the state has the primary obligation. Not always just in thinking, Suleiman, you said it absolutely clearly, that we shouldn't always think about what about the good sides of social media. I think we are not taking adequate advantage of what social media will do for Africa. We are so quick to compare to other regions, we forget that we are still the least digitalized region. So I keep using the word finding a balance even in regulation. I will repeat, Africa, if you look at Article 22 of the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, the right to development is a right, is an enforceable right in Africa. What have states done with it? If we think of social media in the context of development, perhaps if we approached it practically, we approached it pragmatically, some of these issues we talk about fake news and what we would find a balance in ensuring that, like Kunle said, you take away the rights of so many millions of people on the guise of one content or one post. It is not enough. I'm not going back to a particular, I'm not referring to Nigeria alone. In 2017, there was a ruling by the ECOWAS court against Togo. This year alone, Ethiopia has shut down the internet and social media use. Last year, it was Uganda, and I'm not referring to any particular country. But whatever it is, each time we talk about regulation, I'm not just talking about Nigeria or wherever. Any interference must be in pursuance of a legitimate aim. It must be in accordance with the law, and it must be necessary in a democratic society. And Kunle said it aptly that, it is always difficult in a democracy to find a balance between rights of freedom of expression, hate speech or right to free speech, and of course, what will be secure. But an open internet must be the standard. Let us separate social media use from cybersecurity issues. They are two different concepts. And if we can focus on building capacity, if we can focus on building our infrastructure, protecting critical infrastructure, then interfering in social media use will not be the primary aim, but we would rather think of enhancing social media use to create a perfect digital economy. African Union just published last year the African Digital Transformation Strategy. And when we hamper social media use, and when we don't even create the avenue for people to take advantage of social media use, we hinder economic growth. So I'm not just talking about internet restriction, but also the benefits, and finding a balance between the disadvantages in using social media and the advantages. They are both equally important.
Well, we're actually meant to go on a break, but my producers have actually call that off. So let's just keep rolling now, because Nena, this is getting more interesting. Let's latch onto the time we've been so given. Quickly here, I'm trying to look at the good now. Nena is far away in the UK, and Kunle is in the United States, and Yusuf is somewhere in Nigeria. And here I am in the studios, and we're having this conversation for the continent. And Nena has said something, Yusuf. She said, Africa or Africans haven't actually scratched the surface in terms of looking at the good of social media. Speak to us on that. Social media, technology, have we done enough?
Okay, well, I think she spoke brilliantly in that perspective. I would say that the internet penetration in Africa is not pretty high compared to the counterparts outside Africa. Northern Africa, for example, has about 45% of the population having internet presence. And if you talk about Southern Africa, about 41% of the population is online. And Western Africa, that we have Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, and all other West Africa countries, the internet penetration is pretty low. We have 16%. These are the facts brought forth by Statista.com. Then in Eastern Africa, we have 10%. And of course, in Central Africa, we have 8% of the population having internet presence. So this shows clearly without ambiguity that Africans, have got a lot to do in terms of creating internet awareness and presence for its people. But having said that, the fact that West Africa has got 60% of users, of the population having presence on the internet, does not necessarily mean that Nigeria's IT consciousness is at the depth of degradation. No, or we are still on the ladder of development. I must say here flamboyantly that Nigerians, have got to the apex of ICT endeavor. And if you look at the banking sector, for example, compared to the tech inclination of Nigeria's banking sector to that of the UK, you realize that in Nigeria's banking sector, there are about 2 layers of security before you can get your transaction done, which is the protection on cyber security and, of course, cyber integrity. If you found someone's card, for example, and you have access to the CVV, which is the 3 digits behind the card and the card number. These two, information can actually get you to buy something online in the UK or US. In fact, I've had to use someone's card, just with the CVV and the card number alone to do a transaction in Sweden. I didn't have any second level of authentication, like sending me an OTP or me confirming some things with my ATM PIN. But in Nigeria, you will realize that you have a second level of authentication, which is pretty much awesome. So in terms of leveraging on the advancement of ICT, I would say that Nigerians are actually matching up and they are competing brilliantly, and that is a good hedge for us on the world stage as far as ICT is concerned. So what I will emphasize is that the government should also do a lot in supporting ideas that can drive technology and that can drive digital economy using ICT as a ready tool. And social media itself, like Nena did emphasize, it does have a lot of advantages that we leverage on it. We can actually make a lot of good things out of it. But we should not also close our eyes on the huge laxity that are quite annihilating to our existentialism. We shouldn't just take it with levity or push it to laxity. The world advanced countries are also battling the issues of misinformation, deliberate annihilation of truth, using internet as a ready tool. These are the things that we need to focus on. We shouldn't just be preoccupied with the good phase of it alone. That is where I would want to disagree with Unena, because we should also exude much effort that we are putting forth on the good side and to the bad side as well, because people are actually dying every day, all days, due to the misuse of internet for misinformation. Mr. Lede talked about issue of mental health the other time. People are getting misinformed on the internet, affecting people's mental health, people's mental consciousness. These are issues that have to be tackled. In fact, there are certain ICT tools that are being used today to misinform people. You would see a particular video that looks like an event did happen, but it doesn't actually happen.
So I hope you can hear me, Yusuf. Yusuf, if you can. Well, Yusuf, if you can hear me, I needed to come in there quickly before I come to Kunle. On that aspect, who's to blame when we have seen that some of these people have also, and we're talking about the creators of some of these apps or social platforms, have also tried as much as possible to reduce, if not completely take out some of these key concerns we have raised. Who is to blame? Would you want to see a complete shutdown if nothing untoward is not done against stemming, such on that platform?
Let me come in here and just.
By all means, Kunle, please do.
Yes. Let's look at some of the advantages. There are advantages. I want to use the case study of Nigeria. Looking at the music industry, I just wanted to streamline that aspect because it's been the pride of the world lately. When you look at the music industry, you observe that it's been growing, and it's funny because there isn't any government help or support in that arena. You would observe, if you're very keen on what is happening in the Nigeria entertainment scene, you would see that a lot of young Nigerians are taking matters to their hand, and they're making skits. They're becoming millionaires. They're advertising for people. They're earning their income. They're also becoming employers of labor. When you look at the people behind the cameras, when you look at the production people, the extras, the script writers, the skit makers are doing well. And then when you look at the music is not only versatile, it's also they're incorporating other African countries. Now you can see a massive collaboration between a Nigerian celebrity, a Nigerian artist, and another one from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from Tanzania, from the Gambia. Places that we just imagine. It's in there. It's in the books. It's in geography, but we're not actually integrating. We're not communicating. But the internet has made that possible in a very big way. The music industry is arguably $1 million investment now in Nigeria, because you see a lot of people coming in and investing huge amounts of capital on it. Now, it's possible that you can also stream your music. You can also sell your products online, and you make money. Now, that is phasing out, our CDs and all that. Now, what am I saying? These are some of the things, some of the positive sides of social media, of the internet, and you see that it's bringing more people together. It's providing jobs opportunity. There's no time that you'll open Instagram, for instance. There's no time that you wouldn't see a skit that's going to amuse you, or a Nigerian collaborating with. Even it goes far beyond Africa. You've seen more international stars singing to the songs of Thames, for instance, who, by the way, sings in vernacular in some instances, and it's so amazing and thrilling that you have international acts copy that, and now else without being able to happen if it wasn't for the internet. Now, those are the things that we should take credit for, and I would also say this categorically, that the government was not part of this huge success. Now they could butt in and do something now, but the youths of Nigeria, we should give credit and kudos to them. They made this happen. Now, that aside, if you also look at the other interesting part of job creation through the internet and social media, it's increasing on a daily basis, and that is why the government should be very wary of interrupting or intercepting some of these things, or some of this already recorded success in this genre. And we want to encourage, and then if you want to sensitize or you want to encourage internet connectivity or penetration, what I would say is to target the Nigerian youth. The Nigerian youth has more population than the baby boomers, for instance. We have more youth growing and coming into adulthood every single year in, year out. So how else can you target people is to centralize your campaign, whatever that is. It should be solely on the active members of the society, which are the youth, and they're the ones that can carry and disseminate this information in a better way. And it's useful, it's interesting, and we can also continue to encourage that sector. So the government can do a lot of good by starting to put more money for a tablet, for instance, for some of the primary schools. Internet literacy is something that is paramount. I'll give you a critical example. I have a 3-year-old. I recall his second birthday. He was already operating a tablet at 2 years old. And that tells you that if you start from the foundation, it's going to go a long way. And another critical example is coding, for instance. Here in the United States, you'll have coding programs for 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Now, that is catching them young, and they've been able to identify that market, and they've been able to teach them in such a way that they'll understand. And these are some of the things that we also should be looking at. The continent has grown beyond just sending books and sending books and books over and over again. You can have all the dictionaries in the world in a single tablet, and the kids will continue to be educated in the right way. So those are the things that I want us to also look at.
So, well, I think you've taken me back in time when you spoke about CDs. I remember when I started in my radio days, there were vinyls, and from vinyls we had CDs, and now they have suddenly disappeared. And now we're getting to. Now, I think, Nana, help us here, because if we decide to now put the good and the bad on the scale, it's almost tilting on the side of good. Let me know what you think, if I'm wrong.
I lost you for a moment and couldn't hear it again. Can you say again?
The good of social media over, the bad things people have highlighted, especially Yusuf. If I put that on a scale, where do you think it would tilt more?
I don't care, but first of all, I want to correct an impression. Yusuf's impression. I've been working with the Union as an expert in promoting the ratification of the African Union's African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. I would say that cybersecurity or curbing information is not important. I teach cybercrime. Now, what I am saying, I have been unequivocal from the beginning, is that there should be a balance. I have used it severally. I would not support arbitrary social media shutdown if it's not beneficial to any economy. And thank you, Kunle, for saying it, capturing how valuable it is. I am saying that whenever there is any hindrance, it must be in pursuant of a legitimate aim. And I think I can hear you now, Suleiman. I didn't hear the last part where you were saying about the bad, if I can hear you now.
That means there's a delayed feedback. I don't know if you can hear me almost real time now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll let you just wrap up on what you're saying, because you're still on course.
Okay. So what I'm trying to add to this is, of course, I said this as well, that social media, and there has been a research undertaken by the UN portraying that in reality, social media can be this of escalation. It can be, if it is not curtailed, it can be basis for chaos in any society. But I also keep saying that even in all of this, Let's rather focus on our inadequate infrastructure. Yusuf, in some why you have those three-tier levels of, clarification, certification, is sometimes because infrastructure is weak. It goes clearly in other jurisdictions sometimes because the state has put in adequate infrastructure to tackle issues when there is any wrong or when there is any mishap whatsoever. So let's also look at the lack of capacity we have, the lack of expertise, and let us prioritize what is important. If misinformation can be tackled through awareness, public education, public policy, let us pursue that. If misinformation, defamation on the internet, let's also think of engaging tech companies. The way forward is a multi-stakeholder approach. Let's think of engaging tech companies. Let's also hold them liable when they are liable. And that goes back to the policies we make. Nigeria has very good policies. We have a Cybercrime Act, undermining that the ECOWAS Court has asked that Article 22, Section 24 be amended. We have a very robust national security strategy. The African Union is working on an African Union cybersecurity strategy. We have all these policies in place. But if we are not accountable and we cannot implement them, then it becomes a problem. So I am all for security. I am all for government regulating social media use. Of course, we cannot trivialize the misinformation, the rate of hate speech going on. But I keep saying we must find a balance not to take away. We cannot treat these issues like an a la carte menu where we pick and choose what we want. Today, you give the youth social media access, and Kunle has pointed out, if you look at the capacity potential of African youth, if we really focus on a digital transformation agenda for Africa, then we will not be arbitrarily shutting down internet because of elections. It trivializes the value of Africa. In other countries, yes, there are regulations, but it is clear under national law that there is a legitimate aim. Let that be the case of Africa so that we can utilize the benefits of the internet age. We can utilize the benefits of social media for development. We are not there. We need to advance into great stages of development. And let's think of social media beyond just youth tweeting. There is so much more. The UN is utilizing social media for so much. Let's think of it beyond youth just pressing their phones and exchanging. Until we get to that point, then we would realize that indeed there is an adequate balance that can be found between both the negative and the positive, and we can find that balance rightly within the constraints of law and the benefits of development.
Well, I think it's a fine place for us to leave it today on the show. But again, I think it would seem this hasn't actually seen the end of this conversation. We must keep the conversation going. And of course, as they say, every blessing sometimes also you can get to see what they call a curse, and social media is just no exception. Listening to all three of you, the deployment of an undeniably great tool is important to what becomes of this equally great continent. It begins with just a click. So I'll leave it with the words of Nena. She has called for the continent to strike a balance in looking at social media. Many thanks for being such nice company, Yusuf, Jimoh Aweda, Dr. Nena Ifeanyi-Ajufo, and Kunle Falowo. To our viewers across the continent, many thanks for staying with you. See you again.